Ladies and gentlemen, for thousands of years, human beings have told themselves stories. Stories about gods, nations, money, and meaning. These stories shaped civilizations, built empires, and fueled revolutions. Yet there is one quiet force that has shaped our personal lives even more profoundly, though we rarely acknowledge it. It is not luck, nor talent, nor even intelligence. It is discipline, the simple, often uncomfortable decision to act with intention rather than surrender to impulse. Excuses are also stories. Stories we whisper to ourselves to protect our comfort and avoid short-term discomfort. But history shows us a clear pattern. Individuals and societies that choose discipline over excuses are the ones that progress, innovate, and ultimately write the next chapter of the human saga. Today, I want to explore why discipline beats excuses, not as a moral slogan, but as a fundamental truth about how human minds operate and how civilizations thrive. Throughout the long sweep of human history, the most decisive transformations have not been triggered by moments of inspiration or bursts of enthusiasm, but by the slow, intentional practice of disciplined behavior. When we examine the evolution of our species, we find that discipline has always been the silent engine behind every leap forward. Not the flash of genius, not the randomness of luck, but the capacity of human beings to override instinct, delay gratification, and act according to a chosen purpose rather than an immediate feeling. If we strip back the stories we tell about success, we uncover a far more fundamental truth. Discipline is what allows a human mind to take control of ancient biological scripts that have governed our behavior for millions of years. Without discipline, those ancient scripts remain in charge, and they are very rarely aligned with our modern goals. Consider the human brain as a layered structure built across epochs. At its core, life impulses crafted in a prehistoric world of scarcity: seek comfort, conserve energy, repeat what feels familiar, avoid risks, escape discomfort. These impulses were once necessary for survival. A prehistoric hunter-gatherer benefited from avoiding unnecessary exertion. A cautious mind that chose the safer path lived longer and passed on its genes. Excuses, in this context, were not weaknesses, they were survival strategies. The mind learned to generate instant narratives that justified inaction. Better to rest than waste precious calories. Better to avoid danger than confront uncertainty. Better to preserve the familiar than venture into the unknown. These biological tendencies still exist within us, but the world has changed in ways our ancient hardware could never have anticipated. In the modern era, success requires the opposite of what our instincts push us toward. Growth requires discomfort. Progress demands repeated effort. Achievement requires energy expenditure without immediate reward. The ancient brain resists this through excuses, rationalizations, and small stories designed to keep us within the boundaries of comfort. Discipline, therefore, is not merely a moral virtue. It is a cognitive technology, a tool that allows us to override biological programming that no longer serves us. The disciplined individual is not stronger because they feel more motivated. They are stronger because they have learned to distrust the easy narratives of the mind and act according to intention rather than impulse. To understand discipline at its deepest level, we must look beyond the simple idea of self-control. Discipline is the ability to create distance between stimulus and response. Most animals act instantly according to instinct. Humans possess the rare capacity to pause. In that pause, we can question the narrative our brain is generating. The excuse appears, "I'm tired, I'll do it later." Discipline is the ability to recognize this as an outdated survival reflex. The disciplined person does not wait for motivation. They do not ask whether the task feels comfortable. They choose action because they understand that progress is built from accumulated choices, many of which feel unpleasant in the moment. The power lies not in resisting temptation once, but in repeatedly overriding the instinct to retreat into comfort. The story of Human civilization is in many ways the story of collective discipline. Agriculture was not an invention of inspiration, but of discipline. Planting seeds requires delayed gratification on a scale our hunter-gatherer ancestors rarely experienced. You bury food in the ground and wait months before receiving any benefit. This violates every natural instinct toward immediate return. Yet once humans learned to align behavior with long-term outcomes, everything changed. Cities emerged, writing appeared, trade networks expanded, scientific discovery became possible. None of this was fueled by spontaneous desire. All of it required the repeated suppression of short-term impulses in favor of long-term objectives. In this sense, discipline is a civilizational force. It allowed us to step outside the constraints of biology and create systems and structures that would have been unimaginable to the early human mind. On an individual level, the dynamics are the same. Whenever you choose to pursue a goal, whether it involves study, physical improvement, skill development, or emotional growth, you are reenacting the same cognitive revolution that shaped civilization. You are overriding an ancient layer of the brain that resists long-term planning. Your mind generates excuses because that is its evolutionary default. It is not a personal flaw. It is simply ancient software running in a modern world. Discipline is the update that allows you to live not according to prehistoric impulses, but according to chosen meaning. Understanding this shifts the discourse around discipline from one of morality to one of human evolution. You are not battling laziness, you are navigating cognitive systems designed for a very different world. Excuses then become more comprehensible when viewed through this lens. The human brain is a storyteller. It constantly produces narratives that justify our behaviors, even when those behaviors contradict our goals. When you intend to work on your dream project but instead reach for your phone, the brain constructs a quick story. I need a moment to relax. When you postpone a task, it whispers, it's not the right time. These stories feel true because they emerge from deep emotional instincts, but discipline involves recognizing that emotional truth is not the same as objective truth. The disciplined mind sees excuses for what they are. Defensive stories produced by a biology that fears discomfort. Once this awareness emerges, a person can begin to act not based on the story, but based on their chosen direction. A crucial aspect of discipline is the ability to design environments that minimize friction. Individual willpower is fragile, easily overwhelmed by the pull of instinct. Ancient impulses are powerful, so discipline is not merely about resisting them moment by moment. It is about constructing systems that make the desired action easier and the impulsive action harder. This mirrors how societies evolved. Laws, institutions, education systems, and communal rituals all emerged as external forms of discipline. They exist because humans recognize that relying solely on personal will is insufficient. In personal life, rituals, schedules, routines, and habits play the same role. They transform discipline from an occasional act of effort into a sustainable structure that guides daily behavior. The disciplined person does not debate whether to act. They have designed their life in such a way that disciplined behavior becomes the natural default. Another dimension of discipline lies in identity. Humans tend to act according to the identity they believe they possess. If you see yourself as someone inconsistent, you will act inconsistently. If you see yourself as disciplined, each action becomes a reinforcement of that identity. Identity is a story, but it is one of the few stories powerful enough to override instinct. For example, a person who sees themselves as an athlete will train even on days they lack motivation. Not because they feel like it, but because training is a part of who they believe they are. Discipline grows when identity shifts from I occasionally do disciplined things to I am a disciplined person. Identity is the anchor that holds behavior steady when emotions fluctuate. Since human emotions are notoriously unstable, identity becomes a stabilizing force, aligning action with long-term goals rather than momentary feelings. Discipline also requires the ability to embrace discomfort as a necessary part of growth. Modern culture is deeply oriented around comfort. Technology has optimized convenience to such an extent that discomfort feels abnormal. Yet historically, discomfort was simply a part of life. Physical strain, emotional hardship, and uncertainty were constant companions. Today, we treat discomfort as a signal to stop. But discomfort is often evidence that we are pushing beyond the boundary of old habits. It is the cognitive dissonance of evolution. A disciplined mind recognizes discomfort as part of transformation, not as a sign of failure. In fact, many breakthroughs, mental, physical, emotional, are preceded by periods of intense discomfort. Discipline is the courage to stay present during those moments rather than retreating. It is the capacity to see discomfort not as a threat, but as a messenger signaling that something meaningful is happening internally. Underlying discipline is the acceptance of responsibility. Excuses shift responsibility outward. They blame circumstances, timing, external forces. But responsibility turns the focus inward. It acknowledges that while external factors exist, the ultimate driver of action is the individual's choice. Responsibility, why liberates rather than restricts? When you claim responsibility, you reclaim control. You stop waiting for better conditions, more motivation, or perfect timing. You begin to act not because conditions are ideal, but because action itself creates better conditions. Responsibility is the foundation upon which discipline stands. Without responsibility, discipline collapses into sporadic effort. With responsibility, discipline becomes a consistent expression of autonomy. Another important facet is awareness of the mind's long-term trajectory. Humans often underestimate how much small daily decisions accumulate over time. A single day of disciplined action may feel insignificant, but repeated over months or years, it becomes transformative. The challenge is that the brain is biased toward immediate outcomes. It struggles to perceive long-term cumulative growth. Discipline counteracts this bias by trusting the process even when results are invisible. It is similar to geological change. A mountain does not rise from a single volcanic eruption, but from thousands of slow, barely perceptible shifts. In the same way, a disciplined life is built from small actions carried out consistently. The disciplined mind understands that progress is not linear, it is exponential. There is a tipping point where accumulated effort suddenly becomes visible, but reaching that point requires enduring long periods of slow, invisible growth. A deeper understanding of discipline also involves recognizing the role of emotion. People often imagine discipline as the suppression of emotion, but this is inaccurate. Discipline is not emotional suppression, it is emotional orientation. Instead of allowing emotions to dictate decisions, discipline allows intention to guide behavior while acknowledging emotions without surrendering to them. Emotions are data, not commands. A disciplined person can feel unmotivated yet still act. They can feel fear yet still move forward. The goal is not to eliminate emotion, but to place emotion within a broader framework of meaning and purpose. This is a profound cognitive shift. It allows a person to remain centered in their values even when emotional weather changes. Much like the climate, emotional states fluctuate. Discipline is the stable climate pattern that persists despite daily storms. One of the most powerful elements of discipline is narrative reframing. Humans assign meaning to experiences through stories. Excuses often arise because the story we attach to effort is negative. We see effort as struggle, hardship, sacrifice. But if we reshape the story, if effort becomes an expression of growth, an exploration of potential, a form of self-respect, then discipline becomes natural. The story we tell ourselves about effort determines how we respond to it. The disciplined mind chooses narratives that empower action rather than hinder it. This is not self-deception, it is narrative mastery. The stories we choose shape our reality. By choosing narratives that emphasize growth, responsibility, and purpose, we create psychological conditions where discipline thrives. It is also important to recognize that discipline is a form of freedom. People often see discipline as restriction, but in reality, lack of discipline is the true cage. When you are ruled by impulses, cravings, and excuses, you are not free. You are controlled by fleeting emotions and inherited biological scripts. Discipline frees you from these scripts. It gives you the ability to choose a path consciously rather than being pushed by unconscious tendencies. This freedom is not immediate or effortless. It is earned through repeated acts of intentional behavior. But once achieved, it grants a level of autonomy that is otherwise unreachable. You begin to live not by default, but by design. Your future becomes something you create rather than something that happens to you. Another crucial insight is that discipline is rooted in clarity. When your goals are vague, excuses proliferate. The brain thrives in ambiguity because ambiguity provides room for escape. But when your goals are clear, excuses lose power. Clarity acts as a compass that cuts through emotional fog. When you know exactly what you want and why it matters, discipline becomes less about struggle and more about alignment. Every choice becomes a step along a clearly marked path. Without clarity, discipline relies too heavily on sheer will. With clarity, discipline becomes a natural extension of purpose. Clarity simplifies decisions. It eliminates noise. It strengthens identity. It solidifies commitment. And once that alignment is established, excuses cease to be compelling because they no longer fit the narrative of the future you are building. Finally, discipline requires a deep understanding of time. Humans are the only species capable of imagining distant futures and acting as if those futures are real. This ability is both a gift and a burden. Excuses collapse time. They focus on the present moment exclusively, prioritizing comfort now at the expense of everything later. Discipline expands time. It allows the present to be informed by the future. It makes long-term consequences feel real enough to influence immediate action. This is a remarkable cognitive capability. It is the foundation of all planning, innovation, and long-term achievement. When you act with discipline, you are honoring a future version of yourself that cannot yet speak. You are building a bridge between what you are and what you could become. That bridge is constructed one action at a time, one deliberate choice after another, until eventually the future self becomes the present self. Discipline is the tool that makes that transformation possible. It is the mechanism through which humans transcend instinct and step into intention, turning potential into reality and giving shape to the future that waits ahead. Throughout the vast timeline of human existence, excuses did not emerge as signs of weakness or incompetence. They originated as survival tools, deeply intertwined with the evolutionary architecture of the human brain. To understand why excuses hold such power over our daily decisions, we must examine their origins in the environments where early humans struggled, not for success or personal development, but for literal survival. In those ancient landscapes, every action carried a cost. A wrong move could exhaust precious energy reserves or expose one to predators. The human mind evolved mechanisms to avoid unnecessary risks and discomfort. These mechanisms eventually crystallized into patterns of thought that today manifest as excuses. Their purpose was once protective, but in the world we inhabit now, they often sabotage our long-term growth. In a prehistoric environment, energy conservation was not laziness, it was strategy. Every calorie mattered. Humans did not have guaranteed meals. They hunted unpredictable prey, scavenged when necessary, and gathered food in seasons of scarcity. The brain adapted to prioritize actions that maximized survival while minimizing energy expenditure. If an early human faced a difficult or uncomfortable task, hesitation was a natural adaptive response. A cautious pause could mean saving energy for a more urgent challenge later. These protective instincts were woven into the nervous system, forming cognitive patterns that rewarded the avoidance of pain, risk, or exertion. Today, those ancient instincts linger silently inside us, generating excuses whenever a task feels difficult, uncertain, or unfamiliar. The problem is that the purpose of our lives has shifted dramatically, but the instincts have not. Modern humans are not navigating savannas or escaping predators. They are navigating deadlines, goals, aspirations, ambitions, and personal development challenges that require sustained effort. But the brain cannot automatically distinguish between physical danger and psychological discomfort. When you contemplate starting a demanding project, or forcing yourself into a disciplined habit, or confronting a long-term challenge, the brain reacts as if you're about to waste valuable energy that might be needed for survival. It deploys excuses as cognitive shields. These excuses feel like rational thoughts. I'm too tired. I'll begin tomorrow. I'm not ready yet. The conditions aren't right. I don't have enough time. It's too risky. These sentences are modern expressions of ancient survival impulses. They are not designed to help you grow. They are designed to keep you safe from discomfort, uncertainty, and perceived threats. Excuses also arise from another evolutionary force, the human tendency to avoid social risk. In early societies, being rejected or judged by the group carried severe consequences. Acceptance ensured collaboration, protection, and access to shared resources. Rejection could mean isolation and vulnerability. Because of this, the brain evolved fear systems that interpreted potential failure as a social threat. When you hesitate to pursue a goal because you fear embarrassment, criticism, or failure, you are experiencing an ancient biological alarm. Excuses step in to protect you from this imagined social danger. They soften the edges of fear by providing a justification for inaction. The excuse becomes a psychological buffer between your aspirations and your anxieties. But while this buffer protects your emotional comfort, it often undermines your long-term evolution. To truly understand the power of excuses, we must analyze them not simply as statements but as stories. The human brain is a narrative engine. It constructs stories in real time to make sense of complex emotions. Excuses are stories crafted by the mind to reconcile the tension between what we want to do and what we fear doing. These stories feel true because they are born from real emotions. Yet emotional truth is not the same as objective truth. For example, when you feel tired, your mind may say, "I need to rest," even if your body has enough energy to continue working. When a task seems intimidating, the mind may whisper, "This is not the right moment," even though the timing is perfectly adequate. The excuse is not lying. It is interpreting your emotional state through the lens of an ancient survival program. But relying on this program in the modern world often leads to stagnation. Excuses are also intimately tied to identity protection. Human beings have a natural desire to preserve a consistent self-image. When you face a challenge that exposes your weaknesses or limitations, the brain generates excuses to protect your identity from discomfort. It's easier to say, "I didn't have time," than "I was afraid of failing." It's easier to say, "I'll start later," than "I'm struggling to begin." These protective narratives shield the ego from vulnerability. But ironically, the same shield that protects identity in the moment prevents identity from evolving in the long run. Growth requires confronting weakness. Evolution requires exposing yourself to discomfort. The more you protect your identity with excuses, the more your identity becomes fragile. In contrast, individuals who accept discomfort and take responsibility strengthen their identity over time. Excuses also serve as coping mechanisms for emotional overload.